serdecznie na kolejnej wspólnej inicjatywie Polskiego Towarzystwa Psychoanalitycznego i Austriackiego Forum Kultury. Ta współpraca rozwija się bardzo owocnie, też między innymi dzięki obecnej tu pani Ewie Modzelewskiej-Kosowskiej, która prowadzi seminarium od lat. A dzisiaj spotykamy się na wykładzie Sny o zmarłych, o niektórych związkach między żałobą, snem i melancholią. Wykład wygłosi pan Daru Huppert. Chciałbym przedstawić Daru Hupperta. Daru Huppert jest analitykiem szkoleniowym i superwizorem w wiedeńskim Towarzystwie Psychoanalitycznym założonym przez Sigmunda Freuda. Studiował psychologię kliniczną, społeczną w Nowym Jorku, Zurychu i Cambridge. Między innymi w Cambridge wygłaszał również wykłady z psychoanalizy. Jest autorem wielu artykułów obejmujących szeroki wachlarz zagadnień z obszaru psychoanalizy, dotyczących snów, poczucia winy i destrukcyjności. Jest także współredaktorem dwóch książek, w tym Współczesna perspektywa na potem śmierci Sigmunda Freuda. I od kilku lat prowadzi seminaria w Wiedeńskiej Akademii Psychoanalitycznej na temat teorii snów i uważnej lektury tekstów Freuda. O swoim eseju Daru Huppert pisze: jeśli nie mamy halucynacji na jawie, możemy zobaczyć, spotkać zmarłych tylko w naszych snach. Dla pogrążonych w żałobie śniących o swoich zmarłych jest to zatem wyjątkowo przejmujące, przyjemne, boleśnie uwidzicielskie i niesamowite doświadczenie. A jednak związek między snami i pracą żałoby został w niewielkim stopniu zbadany w psychoanalizie. Jest to tym bardziej zagadkowe, że Freud uważał interpretację snów za odpowiedź na śmierć ojca. Zanim zaproszę do wysłuchania wykładu, chcę jeszcze dwa słowa powiedzieć.
I'm sorry, is there anyone here who doesn't understand Polish? Wszyscy rozumieją polski. Znaczy poza panem dyrektorem.
Spotykamy się na Austriackim Forum Kultury i tekst oryginalne teksty Freuda są pisane po niemiecku. Zostały przetłumaczone, ten artykuł Daru Hupperta został przetłumaczony na angielski, a potem na polski. Mamy nadzieję, że w toku dyskusji uda się też odnaleźć związek między tym niemieckim oryginałem.
So we meet in the Austrian Culture Forum, and the text was originally written in German, but then it was translated into English and from English into Polish. So hopefully during our discussion we will be able to find the links to the German original of this text.
Well, thank you very much for...
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes, it's a real privilege to be here. Thank you. Thank you to the Austrian Cultural Forum and to the Polish Society for having me, and also for the possibility of me addressing you in English. Yeah? Because if I would have to speak Polish, we wouldn't get very far.
Tak, chciałam podziękować Austriackiemu Forum Kultury i Towarzystwu za to, że możemy się dzisiaj spotkać. Chciałam też podziękować za możliwość mówienia po angielsku, gdyż gdybym miał mówić po polsku, za daleko byśmy nie zaszli.
And hopefully beside, hopefully we don't get lost in translation, and that we are able to find some form of dialogue after this presentation.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, as I said, hopefully we won't get lost in translation, and that after my presentation we can enter some form of dialogue. Yeah?
Czyli mam nadzieję, że nie zgubimy się w tłumaczeniu jednak i po wykładzie znajdziemy jakąś formę dialogu.
So I shall begin.
Zaczynamy.
Dreaming of the dead. Few essays have changed the course of psychoanalysis as deeply as Mourning and Melancholia. In this essay, Freud, for the first time, succeeded in analyzing the central affect of mourning and in mapping out melancholia, which previously had proven to be elusive. As if this were not enough, his essay stimulated the development of the structural theory, as well as the theory of object relations. These staggering achievements may perhaps explain why another fundamental link between mourning and melancholia and other parts of Freud's theory has almost gone unnoticed. Its relationship to Freud's dream theory, which he declares, I quote, is what is most characteristic and peculiar about psychoanalysis, and something to which there is no counterpart in the rest of our knowledge, end quote. Except for Lewin's seminal contribution, however, there has been no attempt to read mourning and melancholia from the perspective of dream theory. Thus, the analysis of mourning and of melancholia has remained cut off from the dream. A first impression of the intimate relationship between mourning and the dream emerges when we consider that although Mourning and Melancholia is the most important theoretical treatise on grief in psychoanalysis, it is not the most important psychoanalytic testimony of mourning. This lot falls to the interpretation of dreams. Freud himself explains why this is the case. I quote, "For this book has a further subjective significance for me personally, a significance which I only grasped after I had completed it. It was, I found, a portion of my own self-analysis, my reaction to my father's death. That is to say, to the most important event, the most poignant loss of a man's life. The interpretation of dream is therefore a book of mourning, as much as it is a book about mourning and its obstacles. Freud's dreams, or to be more precise, his associations to and interpretations of his dreams, help him, so to speak, psychically to entomb his deceased father. It is highly significant that we encounter a surprising number of dead people in Freud's dreams, and even more so in his analysis of these dreams. The same applies, albeit to a lesser degree, to the dreams of his patients. When Freud claims at one point in the interpretation of dreams that the dreams remind one, I quote, of the peace that has descended upon a battlefield strewn with corpses. I repeat, of the peace that has descended upon a battlefield strewn with corpses, end quote. He thus is also describing a feature of his book. In none of his other works do we encounter so many people who already are dead, and even more people who are alive but would be dead if unconscious wishes were to have their way. In dreams, no one can be sure to survive for long. The fact that Freud nevertheless places the interpretation of dreams under the sign of grieving indicates that in order to set the work of mourning in motion, we have to overcome our desire to humiliate, dismember, and destroy the dead. There's a further conclusion to be drawn. Freud shows that dreams play a central role in the mourning process. What seems to speak against this last assertion is the clinical fact that many patients grieve but do not dream of their dead, i.e., they do not remember such dreams and do not tell them. In cases where patients do not dream of the dead, however, I have always encountered a suspension, or at least a considerable diminution of mourning. It is not difficult to explain this. Such dreams are an incomparable experience for mourners. They are comparable because they show the dead as they appeared to us when they were still alive. And who would not feel the deep temptation to see the beloved dead again if they had an opportunity? It is the temptation of Orpheus, who sought to bring back Eurydice from the underworld. But the deceased do not return, except in our dreams. Precisely because these dreams have such a great significance and are so precious for the mourner, they pose serious difficulties for the analyst in treatment. I will later write about a patient who for years brought dreams about her dead mother to almost every session, but hardly associated to these dreams, and for a long time disregarded my attempts to interpret them. In order to approach the difficulties that arose from the situation, I will refer not only to the interpretation of dreams, but also to Freud's reflections on dreams in Beyond the Pleasure Principle. My attempt to demonstrate the relevance of Freud's dream theory for mourning may, however, seem anachronistic, perhaps even antiquated. Patients who do not associate to the dreams and who hardly react to the interpretations have attracted intense clinical interest for over 60 years. These efforts have given rise to significant developments in dream theory, mainly related to Bion, but also to Ferenczi and to a lesser extent to Winnicott. If one believes that, as is often argued, a paradigm change is necessary, so if one believes that a paradigm change is necessary, then my intention to base myself primarily on Freud's dream theory may seem somewhat antiquarian. Yeah. Yeah.
Nastąpiła drobna zmiana, bo jest w tekście tłumaczonym mamy takie przeformułowanie koncepcji, to zostało jednak zmienione na zmianę paradygmatu. Także potrzebna jest zmiana paradygmatu.
But any such impression is deceptive. Unfortunately, I cannot address the aforementioned developments in dream theory in any detail here, other than to state that it would almost be as big a mistake to want to ignore them across the board as it is to deny Freud any relevance, as some of the more recent authors cheerfully proclaim. A sentence by Nestor quoted by Freud can be cited against the overestimation of the present. Anyway, the thing about progress is that it looks much greater than it really is. End quote. This, by the way, is the motto of Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations. Yeah?
Ten cytat z Nestroja jest również mottem dociekań filozoficznych Wittgensteina w przypisie.
And as we were discussing beforehand, I mean, perhaps a more direct way to put it, if one wants to use rap language, is don't believe the hype. Yeah? Okay?
Czyli,
Ale tekst się nie przesuwa.
bo teraz mówimy poza tekstem. Tak, bo poza tym jak rozmawialiśmy przed wykładem, to bardziej współcześnie ten cytat z Nestroja można by przedstawić jako angielskie, raperskie don't believe the hype, czyli dosłownie nie dajcie się ponieść trendowi.
I'll stick to the text. No other phenomenon in psychoanalysis has ever been studied by a single author in such depth, intensity, comprehensiveness, and detail as dreams were by Freud. The only thing that prevents us from discovering new and surprising aspects of Freud's dreams theory is our supposed familiarity with it. My attempt to link his analysis of the dream to the work of mourning, and to a lesser degree to melancholia, should serve as a hint that there are many untapped potentials in Freud's dream theory that are waiting for someone to discover them. I will begin my discussion with some similarities between dreams and mourning. Although mourning is so familiar to us, writes Freud, it represents a considerable deviation from the normal state. If, as I would suggest, we equate the normal state with ordinary wakefulness, it becomes clear that a considerable part of the deviation that characterizes mourning is its closeness to the state of sleep. and dreams. I will begin with sleep. Patients often report how they crawl into bed to bury themselves under a blanket during periods of intense grief. They no longer want to be disturbed by the world or by anything occurring in themselves. If they could, they would not notice or feel anything at all. For the mourner, sleep, if it is possible, is a consolation. Often, it is merely a narcotic. Metapsychologically speaking, sleep represents the restorative side of what Freud called the nirvana principle, i.e. the tendency to reduce mental tensions as far as possible to nothing. During sleep, the person's ability to love others is thereby eclipsed. The mourner's withdrawal moves in a similar direction, but is less drastic. The sleeper does not love anyone, while the mourner, insofar he or she surrenders to grief, only loves the deceased. The mourner is similar to the dreamer in that both are mesmerized by images. Mourners are captivated by the image of the deceased. Very often they will also dream of the dead ones they love. The affinity between these states goes deeper still. Waking consciousness often has surprisingly little to say about what makes the lost object unique, so that it is felt to be irreplaceable. Dreams tell us more, far more. But why? It is because both the dreams and the work of mourning, insofar as it holds onto the object, are largely determined by the primary processes. To put it another way, the object of the mourner, which Freud characterizes as the longing, object of longing, is far closer to the object of dream than that of waking. But by emphasizing similarities, I do not want to exclude the obvious differences between the dream and mourning. Grief is painful, but pain is not a general characteristic of the dream. Moreover, mourning can also be a social process, like in a burial, which is not the case with dreams. For my investigation, the decisive difference between the two phenomena lies, above all, in that in mourning, the reality principle ultimately prevails, whereas the dream is a hallucinatory process. Freud emphasizes that hallucination defines the limits of mourning. I would add that hallucination is therefore always a latent temptation for the mourner, which he comes dangerously close to in states of exhaustion and intense longing. This is why the hallucinatory character of the dream is so relieving for the mourner, but also so disquieting, and in this case, uncanny.
W tym przypadku, ale i tak niepokojący to jest to unheimlich freudowskie. Niesamowity na obu tłumaczeniu.
The significance of these dreams resides in something that I have already emphasized. Outside of hallucination, it is only in dreams that we're able to meet the dead. I choose the word meet on purpose. Because of its hallucinatory character, the dream has the value of a real experience. This is where it differs from daydreams. It is precisely the sensory character which gives these dreams the quality of a real experience that makes such dreams about the dead so important for the work of mourning. As Freud notes, mourning initially seeks, above all, to continue the psychic existence of the object. Where does this occur more convincingly than in dreams? In the interpretation of dreams, we find a powerful example of this clinging to the objects. It is the famous dream of the burning child, with which Freud opens chapter 7, the famous metapsychological chapter. Freud
Sen o płonącym dziecku otwiera 7 rozdział objaśnienia marzeń sennych. Słynny rozdział metapsychologiczny.
Freud's description of this dream and its circumstances deserves to be quoted in full. I quote, The preliminaries to this dream, to this model dream, were as follows. A father has been watching beside his child's sickbed for days and nights on end. After the child had died, he went into the room to lie down, but left the door open so that he could see it from his bedroom into the room in which his child's body was laid out, with tall candles standing around it. An old man had been engaged to keep watch over it, and sat beside the body, murmuring prayers. After a few hours of sleep, the father had a dream that his child was standing beside his bed, caught him by the arm, and whispered to him reproachfully. In German is es vorwurfsvoll zugeraucht. Father, don't you see that I'm burning? He woke up, noticed the bright glare of light from the next room, hurried into it, and found that the old watchman had dropped off to sleep. And the wrappings in one of the arms of his beloved child's dead body had been burned by a lighted candle that had fallen on them. End quote. As Freud explains, this harrowing dream surprisingly fulfills the desire to sleep. This may not sound like much, almost like nothing at all, but it is a potent motive. In sleep, the mourner no longer wants to know anything about the world in which his child has died, and so dissolves this world into sleep. Sleep is the great narcotic, the mourner's little nirvana. Macbeth, famously says, he says that he hears his voices which say, Macbeth has murdered sleep. It's horrifying. Yeah?
Macbeth, słynny cytat z Macbetha jest taki, że Macbeth zamordował sen. To jest przerażająca wizja.
And Macbeth himself, calls sleep the balm of hurt minds, great nature's second feast.
Sam Macbeth mówi, że sen jest balsamem na zranione umysły.
Second feast?
Feast, yeah.
Czyli drugą ucztą natury.
Or, sorry, I'm just improvising here, but Hamlet, to die, to sleep, no more. Yeah? To sleep, that's the desire. Yeah?
Improwizuję tutaj, ale Hamlet też mówi umrzeć, spać, nic więcej. Tak? Spać to jest to pragnienie.
But then he says, to sleep perchance to dream. There's the rub. That's the problem. Yeah? So this is all about the nirvana principle. Yeah?
Ale dalej mówi spać, ale być może śnić. I tu jest problem. Tak? To wszystko kręci się wokół tej zasady nirwany.
So back to what?
Wracamy do Freuda.
The dream of the burning child fulfills a second, desperate wish. I quote, in the dream, the dead child behaves like a living one. It even admonishes the father, comes to his bedside, and pulls him by the arm. For the sake of this wish fulfillment, the father has now extended sleep by a moment. If the father had awakened first, and then drawn the conclusion that led him to the mortuary, he would have shortened the child's life by this one moment. In these sentences, Freud makes a stirring plea in favor of the reality of dreams. From the point of view of waking consciousness, however, things look starkly different. If there's one duty that the father has, it is to wake up as soon as he perceives the flames and to rush into the next room to put out the fire that is burning his child's body. Since the one and only thing the father must do is wake up, it seems alarming, disturbing, uncanny, that he sleeps in order to dream of his child.
Znowu to, że ojciec śpi, aby śnić o swoim dziecku, jest niepokojące i niesamowite. Znowu, uncanny. Unheimlich.
This dream clearly shows how overbearing, how overpowering the mourner's tendency is to turn away from the world in order to cling to the existence of a lost object, even if only for a moment. So far I've emphasized the regressive side of mourning, the desire to hold on to the lost object. But the work of mourning is only complete when the verdict of the reality principle finally prevails and the libido is withdrawn from the object. Only then does the mourner stop treating the dead person like a living person. As the dream of the burning child shows, both moments of mourning, its regressive and its reality aspects, become tangible through the succession of dreaming and waking. The scene in which the child stands by the father's bed, grabs him by the sleeves and whispers his terrible reproach to the father is the result of a libidinal overinvestment, i.e. the regressive moment of mourning. It is a hallucinatory wish fulfillment that brings back the child to life. When the father finally wakes up, he has to recognize that his child is, in fact, dead. Otherwise, he will not be able to save the child's body from the flames. By recognizing this death, the father completes the decisive step in mourning. He withdraws the libido from the child, which just before, in the dream, he had perceived as alive. Of course, a loss as grave as this would require thousands of such cycles of overinvestment and then withdrawal of libido. Such work may never be completed, and evidently this work will not take place solely through the succession of dreaming and waking. But where else than in the sequence of these two states does this work take place with such overwhelming sensory evidence and in such short time? The dream awakens the child to life. And the awakening from the dream then declares it dead. Dreaming and waking are thus a, if not the most basic model for the work of mourning. Since the hallucinatory dream image is of central importance in grieving, it is worth outlining some of its functions. When the deceased person is brought back to life in a dream, this process not only satisfies the desires to meet the dead, it also satisfies the dreamer's omnipotence of thought, as well as his voyeuristic urges. If the mourner's relationship, mourners, not murderers, yeah? If the mourner's relationship to the deceased is strongly ambivalent, the dream image takes on a new function. The hatred of the bereaved turns the deceased into an enemy who has now become invisible. Because we not only fear the presence of the deceased, but also long for it, and because we cannot see this enemy, we are overcome by the disquieting feeling that he or she is lying in wait for us everywhere. As soon as we see the lost object in the dream, this potential omnipresence is banished. In this respect, the appearance of the dead in dreams brings relief. If we now look at our destructive impulses towards the dead, the relieving effect of the dream image becomes apparent again. In addition to the triumph over the deceased, the dream image also provides us with the proof that we have not completely destroyed or annihilated this person within us. And the distinction between destruction and annihilation here points to the difference in Freud's conception between the destructive drive and the death drive.
Różnica między zniszczeniem a unicestwieniem tutaj w tekście wskazuje na różnicę u Freuda pomiędzy popędem niszczenia i popędem śmierci.
Some mourners, however, are so tormented by the image of the dead that only waking up offers them relief. There is, however, not only the desire to see the object, mourners also want to be seen by it. Just how important is this passive desire becomes clear when we remember, by contrast, that Oedipus puts out his eyes because he cannot bear to look at his parents and his children. What Oedipus forgets, in so doing, is precisely the dream. Self-mutilation and blindness do not protect him from being exposed by his dreams. Some bereaved people can bear the gaze of the lost object as little as Oedipus could. More often, however, mourners will deeply long to be visible to the lost object. It is dreaming that makes this possible. Having dealt with some of the features of the dream that make it so significant for the work of mourning, it is time to examine the further use of the dream in the sessions. In Mourning and Melancholia, Freud emphasizes that the work of mourning is carried out on details, i.e. not on the gestalt, not on the unity of the object, but on specific memories and expectations. No one can say which memories and expectations will be decisive at a certain point in the mourning process. We often do not know the significant scenes or events, and even if we do not know which aspects of them are decisive. Because the object of grief is, as I indicated earlier, largely determined by the primary process, it is often small, seemingly unimportant, sometimes disturbing details insufficiently noted by our consciousness that set grieving in motion. Tracking down these details is no easy task. Dreams, and above all, the patient's association to these dreams, provide an irreplaceable service. In the dream of the burning child, the child reproachfully murmurs, "Father, don't you see that I'm burning?" Sentences like this are destined to haunt generations of psychoanalysts. As inevitable as speculations about these utterances are, we cannot know what it means, for we lack associations. This dream was told to Freud by a patient who had heard about it in a lecture. If, however, the father were able to talk about such things, his associations would be part of the work of mourning, just as Freud's associations are in the interpretation of dreams.